What up everyone? In today's video we're going to be talking about the Alberta Carbon Tax. Now this is going to be a bit of a continuation on a previous video where I talk about how the left is terrible at their messaging. So going on to the carbon tax, I personally find from my experience there is more out there to say that the carbon tax will be a net negative to Alberta than there is going to be a net positive. So that is how I see, in this case, how the left is especially weak at delivering the message of how this is supposed to help. So let's dive into it. The aim of the carbon tax is to offer an incentive for people to use less fuels or less energy that contributes to emissions. By doing so, in 2017 when it was implemented, there was supposed to be a $20 tax per ton of these fuels. Next year in 2018, that is going to go up to $30 per ton. Now to help offset that, people are going to be eligible to get a rebate on the carbon tax. This would work, I guess, similarly to a GST rebate in other provinces that have, or a provincial sales tax rebate in other provinces where they mail you out a check every so often with just money you saved on your taxes. Aimed at something similar, which I can understand could be helpful to people who may need a little extra money every now and again. So I don't know why that's not being brought forward more often by people either in the NDP government or people that support them. Because to me that could be seen as a benefit that more people may appreciate. Now through the tax itself, that $30 and that the $20 this year, it is estimated that in 5 years there will be approximately $9.6 billion that the government will now have, and it can be used to help diversify or further diversify the Alberta economy. That is a bit harder to say if that's necessarily good or bad. Now, diversifying an economy, just like when any of us attempt to diversify our income, where we have multiple income sources, having multiple ways of actually earning income is definitely a benefit. However, it's the execution that I think could be the major culprit that makes or breaks this carbon tax in the eyes of a lot of people. Personally, that is where the left is failing in this instance. It's not helping alleviate anybody's fears. We have the right on one side saying that heating is going to go up, the cost of heating is going to go up, the cost of fuel is going to go up, anything that is delivered in a truck that uses fuel, the prices is going to go up, and people are going to end up paying way more for their goods and services. You don't hear anybody on the left trying to dispel any of those claims, trying to prove them wrong. You don't hear anything. All you're hearing is somebody on the other side of the debate saying their facts. And in the media we have today, we only hear one side talking. A lot of people may just accept that as the truth. And that is a failing on the left again, on their messaging. Because when you diversify an economy, this could be like Justin Trudeau's phase-out comment. Are we diversifying, or are you shutting down one industry to build another? Now, are all those jobs going to be transferable? Like, are we just forsaking the entire coal industry to go to green energy? Now, are all those jobs that we're going to lose in coal, are they going to transfer to the green sector? That is a major concern to anybody that works in coal. There are communities here that rely on that industry, and now that very much the industry is in major trouble, there are towns that are now in trouble. Look at Hannah or Grand Cache in Alberta for the perfect example of this. And it's unfortunate because those are wonderful communities that did not deserve this. Here is where I think they have failed the most, where if this was in school and if this grade actually did exist, they would deserve an F minus. As in maybe even less than 0. Under this plan, the business tax rate is supposed to be reduced to 2%, which allegedly is supposed to be around the same as Saskatchewan. So you would think that this is something the NDP would want to brag about, that we lowered the tax rate. That this should mean Alberta is attractive to do business in. That this will help businesses. This will help small businesses. This will help major industry. Alberta's in business. You would think that this is what their MPPs, you'd think this is what their MLAs would be on the news, screaming about on TV, screaming about on the radio, screaming about in newspapers, screaming about on rooftops. You would think this is something they'd want to brag about and constantly throw in the opposition's face. Unfortunately, they're not. They're letting the opposition, the right wing, flaunt in their face that despite a low tax rate, Alberta is still not attractive enough to do business in the eyes of outside corporations, of outside businesses that may look to set up shop in Alberta or may have looked to set up shop in Alberta before the downturn. Their side is getting much more airtime, much more word of mouth, partly because, or actually not partly, there's only one reason, and it's because they're the only ones talking, which is ridiculous. Now we're going to go on to some of the drawbacks. Now, the idea of some kind of legislation to offer incentives for cleaner energy, for renewable energy, green energy, call it whatever you want, to help the environment. Offering incentives to use more of that type of energy, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. However, it goes back to how Justin Trudeau's phase-out comment was ridiculous. Ridiculous, at least in how he presented it. Those renewable energies, those alternative green energies, are not developed enough. The infrastructure is not there to fully support it yet. It is not, renewables are not at a point where they can majorly take over from what we use today. Sure, people may need incentives, and there may need to be political will to start the conversion. However, the technology actually has to be at a certain level to which we could actually pull it off, of which it's not there yet. To a lot of people, solar panels and windmills and electric cars are financially out of reach. So far out of reach, you may need more than a government subsidy to pay for them. It's not worth losing your house, going so far into debt, so you can pay for these, to pay for panels, to pay for a windmill, to put on your home, to gain power. At this point, it is not financially feasible for people on middle class incomes. It's just not. And no rebate or subsidy at this point, unless the government's going to pay for it all themselves, and even there it's unsustainable because where the money still has to come from somewhere. And if it's going to come from the government, it's going to be coming from our pockets. Taxes somewhere else will end up just going up. So right here, it's unsustainable at this point In 50 years, who knows? In 20 years, who knows? But right now, it's out of reach, regardless if there's a carbon tax in place or not. Another drawback I've found that I find a little concerning is, what's the criteria to actually get a rebate? How much do you have to make to actually qualify? Essentially, how low is the bar? Because there's still people that may benefit from a rebate that may not get it because they're deemed to make too much. They're deemed that they make too much money. And not knowing what the actual cutoff is myself, it does concern me. The skeptic, the pessimist, and the cynic in me says it's probably going to be way lower than it should be. Just because you make $70,000 or $50,000 doesn't necessarily mean you're well off. Sure, there are some people that would love to make that much money, but it doesn't mean you're in the quote-unquote 1% after that. There are plenty of people who try to raise families on that income who still struggle to make ends meet. And one thing I should mention also, just because you're also getting that rebate doesn't necessarily mean that it may even help. If the worst case scenario happens and price of everything goes up, you're still losing money and you're probably not going to get enough money to make up the difference you're paying in services. So, again, another point where the left is failing to get their message out, and to get their message out properly, where they know people understand, and they are dispelling improper rumors about their policy. This is why I get so frustrated with the left wing in general. It's stuff like this. Now, one last thing. The right wing and the opposition in general has been talking about how this could affect the heating price for everybody heating their homes. There's a fear that it could double or increase far worse than double all our heating bills. Now, I've heard a lot of comparisons that it will be similar to what's happening in Ontario. Comparing it to the situation in Ontario, I will say first, is all we could really go by at this point as far as an example within the country. We don't have any other data in our country to base any of our assumptions on. So of course we would be using that as an example. So people need to relax a little bit when they call bullshit. Now, I'm a little skeptical when we use the Ontario example because there's different factors than they're involved here. More in a sense of how the power is generated and the distribution of power between Ontario and the US that have many different factors that could make it a very different situation. So personally, I would advise everybody to, if you're comparing the two, take it with a grain of salt at least. Be wary. Don't completely discount it, but don't be so certain it's going to be the same thing, because there are different factors. And I encourage you to look it up for yourself. We've come this far now. The carbon tax. Is it going to hurt or is it going to help? At this point, I have to admit, I am incredibly unsure. I have never really understood how a carbon tax is supposed to help. I have never understood how a tax is supposed to help on anything. Personally, I don't see the carbon tax lasting another government unless the NDP wins again in the next election sometime 2019. If the Wild Rose gets in, I'm sure it will be repealed. If the Progressive Conservatives get in, I'm sure it could be repealed. However, you never know in politics. But this is one of the better examples that I feel you could point to when it comes to the left having weak messaging. All in all, I don't think the carbon tax is helping right now. I will admit, it is too early to tell if it will work. But I have seen some uncertainty that this has generated, to which there isn't a lot of new development happening in Alberta. So at least presently, I could say it's not it's not helping. Maybe later, we could say differently. But at this point, it doesn't appear to be helping. But in all fairness, when it was just implemented on the first of the month, the first day of this year, there isn't much to go on. So that question is very much still up in the air. Anyway, I appreciate you watching this video. Please share it, please subscribe, and if you disagree or agree or you want to continue the conversation, please leave a comment. Thank you, and have a good day.